Get some feedback.
I don't think we're gonna get the buzz. I think what's gonna happen is we're gonna hear an echo.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right. So today's Parsha is Pinchas. There is a lot to talk about. Boy, these people are really. Okay. There is a lot to talk about with Pinchas. The thing that Ruth just mentioned here, whether or not you could hear her, was that Pinchas was rewarded for his act of violence.
Are you coming to have breakfast at the table, or do you want a bite in bed?
Oh,
Do you want
boy.
to come sit at the table, or do you want a bite in bed?
And tell her to be.
Yeah.
Want to
I'm
come
gonna-
sit at the table?
She's not at the computer right now.
Sit at the table, or do you want to?
Chaya, mute yourself.
How did that happen?
I don't know, but how's mom's breakfast going?
Not well at all.
Well, mute yourself so we can not hear
I'm
the.
sorry, I thought I had. My apology.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well. I think this is it. So, Ruth asked about Pinchas being rewarded for his toil. This is another perfect example of how we have objections or skittish feelings about the same things that the rabbis did when they read the book. The ancient rabbis they weren't big on zealotry. They saw where it had happened. They know the history. You know, the zealots in Jerusalem, you know, who caused the war to go on and on and on until Yochanan ben Zakkai had himself fake death and get out of the city so he could start an academy at Yavne. You know, the fact that Hanukkah is in the schedule, in the calendar at all, is really amazing because it's about a bunch of zealots, and it doesn't last. Like the Maccabees, you know, they had that moment of recognition of we're getting our freedom back. We're fighting back the Assyrian Greeks, but within a few generations, the whole thing just went downhill, and they were completely assimilated, and it was not a good time. But the zealotry didn't lead to anything. With Pinchas, some people think the reward was just, okay, you got it done, now let's forget about it. I'm going to give you this reward, but don't do it again. That's the rabbi's take on it. So, you have a question? No.
I keep thinking that, between Pinchas and Amalek, it's basically the world seems to be doing to us what we were doing to other people in that era.
Yes,
Yeah.
say that again.
You know, we basically between the Amalek where we're about to run around killing people,
Yeah.
and and Pinchas, it's a really fun. Yeah.
It was
For a loving God, that's a little scary.
You know, this loving God business. Loving God's everywhere. You know, whether you're polytheistic or monotheistic, loving gods get violent.
Violent or angry?
Both. I mean, anger usually leads the violence, but they do. And what they create from it doesn't last. And for those out there thinking, well, what about that other religion of love? Well,
Hardly.
yeah. that doesn't work out exactly all peaceful either. So, all right. Okay, so one of the big things that happens in this section here is Moses is told he's going to die and get everything ready. Now you can ask, why is that story here? Because he dies for real at the end of Deuteronomy. There's a lot of stories here that are set up to tell a story by the fact that they're building blocks for a bigger story. So, Rashi likes to say there's no before and after in the Torah. In other words, things can get jumbled up in chronological or unchronological or dischronological order. And, you know, that's fine. It's for the purposes of getting a point across. What page is it, Ruth?
I can't find it here.
Oh, okay.
Well, 918 is where Pinchas starts.
918. Well, what do you know? I'm a page off. Okay.
Oh, it's right from the beginning.
Yep. Now, we do find some interesting things out about these characters. Pinchas has killed an Israelite man and a Midianite woman in one stroke because they were arranged that way. It was convenient. And who were these people?
Midianite and Israelite.
Yeah, but
They were doing something in public.
yeah, well, right. But it gives you their names,
Yeah, right.
and that's important here.
Well, she was the daughter of a tribal head.
Yeah, but who's he? Okay, he was Zimri ben Salu, and he was the Nasi, the chieftain of a Simeonite ancestral house, they translate that. In other words, he's from the tribe of Shimon. Shimon. He's from the tribe of Shimon. Pinchas, who winds up killing this guy, is a priest. And all priests are from the tribe of Levi. Now, what big incident happened where Shimon and Levi were involved?
Yeah, oh, with Joseph.
Right?
The
Befo-
city
bef-
of Shem, they.
Yeah, yeah,
dragged
yeah,
everybody
yeah.
out.
Right.
Right,
Shimon never got any land for that, as nor did Levi.
right. That's sort of where we're going here.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, why, but what's the difference between them? Shimon and Levi are both capable of great violence in the biblical story that takes place after Dinah gets violated. And they say, should we act as if, you know, should we let our sister be treated as a zonah? And, let's see. Okay, so the first story, God gives them this covenant of peace, but again, what's the difference in the violence between Shimon and Levi?
Where are we in the course?
About right at the beginning of the parsha, about 9:18,
918.
9:18, 9:19. Okay. So, where else did the Levites perform an act of violence?
This is the golden cat.
Yeah, what happened? Ken says it's the golden calf,
Well, there were thousands that died.
right?
They had to
And what was their punishment? The people who were cavorting around and dancing around the golden calf, they were basically executed. Dave, you can't have food or coffee in here, just water.
Or coffee. Okay.
And I know you have some questions, so get back in here.
Questions I have?
So, okay, we still have a few more minutes here. I know we didn't get a lot done because this is a new thing, but we're going to go a little bit longer. The Levites were singled out to carry out the executions of those who sinned during the golden calf. They were commanded by God to do this violent act, and they did it. On the other hand, you have Shimon, who does violence for violence's sake. He doesn't have that caveat. He doesn't have that rider on him. He doesn't have that redeeming factor that Levi has. So when Shimon and Levi, here we have a Levite killing a Shimonite, it's because he was commanded to. Yeah, he felt commanded to. On the other hand, the Shimon violence, there's another example of Shimoni violence, I forget where it is. At any rate. Okay.
Somehow this ties in right to the Korach, because,
Mm-hmm.
right, because Korach gets swallowed up over, then people get swallowed up,
Right.
killed, but then his offspring are forgiven, or descendants.
Right, right. His offspring. Now here, though, if you're imagining the first time this gets told around the campfire, when you have a Levite killing somebody from Shimon, everybody knew this background. I mean, it's not like they had cable and 100 channels to choose from. They had, they knew the story, and they would pick up on a lot of nuances that we might not, because we don't have that same framework in our mind. But this was definitely a way of illustrating. Are you backing up, Robbie? Okay. So at any rate, there's a lot of that in the Torah where it's at a different level. It's at a level where people are saying, okay, this is the story, this is its symbolism, this is what it really means. There's the four ways, the four depths of interpretation that's pardes, pshat. Pardes is, in this case, an acronym. The pay is for pshat. The resh is for, the resh for? Anyway, the dalet is for dot, and the samach is for sod. That's the secret one. So the dalet is for drash. So pshat. So okay. At any rate, they were more in tune with that than people without that kind of background. So,
Rabbi,
yeah,
this sort of shows God have a quick temper.
yeah, I know when it says that he takes a long time to get angry, that's one of the
But how about
13,
that prayer we say all the time, be slow to anger?
he's slow to anger, right?
And God makes these statements and then has to back off several times.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. I mean,
What kind of God is that a picture of? Well, it seems to me it's a very human picture.
yeah, it is.
But it never really says in the Bible that God is omnipotent, omniscient, and all good.
So God's more like a very nice chairman of the board.
Well, yeah, he has power over a lot of things, you're right. Bob Wilkoff is just saying that God is sort of like a chairman of the board. He has influence and power, but he's not everywhere omniscient, all-knowing, and he's not, what was the other one? Omniscient, omnipotent, all-powerful.
Well,
And God changes his mind.
It is possible that we have a certain free will, you know,
Oh, now we can get back on that.
I'm not getting back to that. Okay, most religions say this is it, you believe it, or you don't,
Right,
okay? That's not us.
right,
And God is
like us,
God, but he's not perfect.
right. I don't think there, I don't,
He's not perfect at all.
from what I've read, I don't believe that there's in the Bible the idea that God is perfect. God is just on the other side of the enemy, which is chaos. God's there to, he's the best antidote we have to chaos. Following the rules and even in the Bible, following the rules tips them toward order, but breaking the rules tips them toward chaos. This is more or less an ancient Israelite perspective on this, but they never, they don't usually go around saying God is perfect. That comes later.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think if you were discussing this in an Orthodox congregation, they find explanations for everything. And
Yeah, I thought of that.
God is perfect. There's a reason for everything, whether God.
Right, got psychology, reverse psychology. Don't eat the apple. Of course, I want them to eat the apple. Okay.
Can you repeat the comment? I can hear you, but not
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, I know, it's an imperfect system. But thank you for joining us on Zoom. You're the only one. Yeah.
Shabbat shalom.
Everybody say hello.
Shabbat shalom.
But shalom.
Stay indoors because it's hot outside.
Ken says stay indoors because it's hot outside. I don't know how many people are watching online, but this is probably a little confusing. David, you said you had some questions.
Yeah, first of all, I don't know, where are we on the trimester?
On the triennial cycle, we're in the second triennial group. But that's okay, anywhere in the Parsha is up for grabs.
What is this, I didn't fully understand the Baal Peor, because, in the overall sense, you have the feeling that the sin was the golden calf, and then they were going to have 40 years for the generation to die up. I didn't realize that there were, like other problems that took place.
Yeah, this was not at the golden calf. Baal Peor was where the Midianite women were seducing Israelite men. And they were doing it in the traditional way of seduction, using that sex thing. And they were also convincing some of the Israelite men to worship the Midianite gods. And that's the big bugaboo.
So at the bottom of 919, they talk about how Balaam realized that he couldn't defeat. You wanna talk?
No, go, keep going.
So, the whole thing is he realized that he couldn't defeat the Israelites physically, so he kind of did a backdoor where he wanted to integrate the Midianite cult and culture into the Israelites
Right.
and defeat them that way by having them assimilate into their morality and stuff by the use of sex.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The first terrorists.
Well, certainly one of our first enemies. And if it's terror, it was terror with sex involved. So I think maybe make a good movie, I don't know.
What was the reason for it, the Midianite?
The Midianites thought that the Israelites were too big and they were dangerous. They had beaten kings and other kings in the wilderness, Og, the king of Bashan, and the guy who was the head of Moab. So it's listed in Psalm 136. I just can't remember it right now. But yeah.
And then I have my oft repeated, I know I've come to you with this, other rabbis. Moses married a Midianite woman.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I mean,
He was in Midian. He was staying at the house of the
by his dad,
high priest of Midian,
yeah.
who comes out to be Jethro or Yitro.
Yitro.
And there's this process called propinquity, that two people in close quarters and constantly exposed to each other get fond of each other. Sort of like, in addition to familiarity breeds contempt, it also just breeds. Yep, Moses married a Midianite woman, but by the time the later stories happen, we're not sure he's still married to her. That thing with Aaron and Miriam.
I was about to say with Miriam, she condemns him for marrying
A Cushite,
Ahushai.
right, which is
Is that
ancient Hebrew for black, like Ethiopian.
nation of Ethiopia?
Yeah, any more. Okay.
Did they have children? Is there mention?
Moses and Zipporah having children.
Yeah.
Yes. One is called Gershom, a stranger there. Gershom. And the other is called Eliezer, God is my help. And neither one of them have a word to say in the Bible.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
And so it's not, the legacy that Moses leaves is not direct descendancy. His children, he doesn't start a dynasty. Aaron, on the other hand, does. We can learn a lot from that too. We're chatting about the Parsha for just a few more minutes. If anybody has anything to add.
But did you say also that in this Parsha that God tells Moses that he will not enter the land? I couldn't find that.
Yeah,
It does.
I
gonna ask
was
about
thinking
that.
the commentary said there are 5 times from this point on that it's mentioned that he will not are getting into.
right, but in this Parsha, what's interesting is Moses requests from God to choose his successor. And he doesn't say, make my kid my successor. You know, let my kid inherit what I built. He doesn't do that. He says, there's a very particular way it's put. It says, Moses says to God, you who know the inner workings of all people, but there's a particular word. Let me see if I can find it. It's a good thing to do.
And 28 somewhere.
928.
So that's the succession of Moses by Joshua.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, page 928, verse 15. Moses says to God, "Let the Lord, source of the breath of all flesh, appoint someone over the community who shall go out before them and come in before them, and shall take them out and bring them in, so that the Lord's community may not be like sheep that have no shepherd." But what they translate as breath of all flesh In Hebrew, it's Elohei haruchot l'chol basar. And that's interpreted to mean that everybody is different, and the next leader, one of the big qualifications for a leader is that he has to be able to deal with all different kinds of people, and everybody's got a different approach. There are no two human beings who are identical. There's a Mishnah that God is not like a person who makes a mold for a coin and all the coins come out the same. But if a person is created in God's image, look at the diversity comes up. They're all in God's image, but everybody's different. No two people are alike. So with that, Moses is asking for someone who will be able to handle the differences with sensitivity to their needs and still be the leader, because they need somebody to pull them across the line.
Almost like a moderate, because it says that Aaron and Moses kind of offset each other in terms of demeanor. And I don't know, who is Aaron's counterpart in the next generation?
Well,
Or is that dichotomy sort of irrelevant after that?
well, the priests remain the priestly line, the descendants of Aaron,
But there's still a high priest. Aaron is the high priest.
the highest.
The highest.
He's the first high priest.
So how did they select in the future who that would be?
That's a good question. I don't have an easy, quick answer for it, but they narrowed it down. I think Sadok was one of the great-grandchildren or something, and all priests now come from him. And the high priest, I don't think was a hereditary job, but I might be wrong about that. Yeah, Ruth.
I'm thinking back. Okay, you said that there's some intimation that Moses did not remain married to a Midianite.
It's a little unclear.
And when the other two, names just vanished from me, complained about her.
Oh, very.
Miriam and Aaron.
Yeah,
Miriam and Aaron. Moses is sister and brother.
yeah, I know who I'm talking about, but the words aren't coming out.
I can
I don't know,
maybe-
maybe all of that.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that Moses, the sons, her sons, Moses' sons, do not appear again. Maybe there's a message in there about who you're supposed to marry.
Interesting.
Maybe not.
Maybe, maybe not. That's a really good point. I haven't seen that.
Oh, good.
I think the concept that you can't marry out was shattered by the book of Ruth, who became.
Yeah, but this is all before that.
No, I know, but I'm saying it's the follow-up.
His point is that, you know,
The-
because
The greater Jewish culture does welcome outsiders if they want to be part of us.
that's right,
Stephen was the
pretty important.
forerunner of the future Messiah.
Well, they weren't rewarded for their complaining about it. Right,
No, Miriam was punished.
right, so
And,
that does say something.
yeah, and people will say, well, wasn't Aaron punished?
That's right. But there was no spear.
Zipporah ends up, the tradition makes her sort of the hero of the circumcision story.
Right, right.
So that wouldn't seem to be such a message about not marrying outsiders.
She seems to have understood that not complying with the tradition of circumcision led to an attack on Moses that only Zipporah could have stopped. It's the weirdest story in the Bible. Well, one of the weirdest.
Yeah, it has competition.
It certainly does. Okay, Dave, do you have any other questions?
So we, at least, I've learned, we call it the Sunday school version, that the reason why Moses did not go into the promised land
Right.
was because, they didn't want him to die and have a place and then have that become holy ground.
Right. I think that's a rabbinic take, but I think it's true. It certainly works with the text that to this day, we don't know where Moses' grave is. And there's a midrash about somebody finding it, and then all of a sudden, he looks across the mountain range to another mountaintop, and it's over there. It's not here anymore. In other words, we don't know where it is, and you're right, because they didn't want to deify the human being. And it's like that in the Haggadah for Passover. Moses is, I think, mentioned once in passing in a traditional Haggadah. But a lot of more modern people have put Moses back in because they know he's a character in the Exodus story. How can you have it without Moses? It's not about Moses. The Passover Seder is there to make you think about our people
But then here the inference
and
is
the
that
relationship
he's
to God.
punished. Here the inference seems to be that he's punished. And his punishment is, okay, you can't go into the promised land. And something about putting one hand on Joshua and he put two hands.
Yeah.
Maybe that's for a sidebar.
Well, just very quickly, I'll make that the last point. There's a division of labor, a separation of powers. You know, like in the United States, you have the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. There was a division of labor back then too, between prophets, kings, and the people. And what Moses does in order to transfer some of his hod, some of his charisma to Joshua is that he puts his hands on him, getting him the priestly blood, and he gets the prophetic from Moses, and he gets they didn't really have a legislative branch yet. So we're juggling chairs here for a minute. But at any rate,
That's the
what
legislative.
what's that, Chai?
That's the legislative branch.
They didn't have that. The legislative branch was Moses, was Yitro, yeah. Judges and the whole system. What I was trying to finish here
Before you quit,
was that the ceremony that Moses did to transfer the power took into account all those things so that in the public eye, there was no doubt that he would be the successor. He had the approval of all the different branches, the priestly, the prophet, and the king.
how do we get a term, high priest? Are you the high rabbi and I'm the lower rabbi?
Well, I'm not in college anymore, but okay.
Remember your sophomore year, that's the key.
But it just interests me that we pick.
Well, it's mentioned in the Torah. It goes back as far as that there's all the priests and there's a high priest that leads them. And I don't know where the origin of that is, other than Aaron was like the high priest because he was the first.
Plus, they had a special role that even the other priests did not have.
Right.
They went into the Holy of Holies.
But by the time that this is written down, he's got that job. He's got the job of going into the Holy of Holies with a golden rope in case he dies in there to pull him out with. Okay. Well, this is a little awkward, but we'll see what happens. And I'm looking forward to your feedback. Yes, I am looking forward to your feedback, even as awkward as this morning may have been. I want to thank everybody at home. We're going to be moving from this into the service in just a second, and I'm going to close the Zoom, and we're going to make all this other stuff disappear. Thanks for joining us, Chaya.
Yeah, no before you stand.
No, dot means no?
Yeah, like Yodea, like have knowledge of. No before whom you stand. In other words, when you're standing in front of the ark, you're in front of the. Yeah, yeah.
That was the reason why.
That Well, this is a nice early turnout.
You gotta read your emails.
Tony, I guess we're ready for the AC.
It's more fun than it's broadcasting it. That's cute. You want a big print or? Well,
But yeah, your Chumash was up here. It's fine. Robbie has yours before. Oh, I don't care what that is. Rabbi Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Have you seen my place?
Yeah, inside, when my dad and I drove by, the interior was on. His light in his car was on.
All right.
I haven't been here, so, sell brochures.
No. Kasher Tevra, Shabbat Shalom.
Oh, yours was underneath.
And for anyone joining us on the internet, Shabbat Shalom. Dr. Turbo, Shabbat Shalom. And now we're going to do a very brief preliminary service. You know, the idea of the preliminary service is to get you in the mood for prayer. And another way to do that is to learn and study. So we tried that one out today. And we're going to have, we're going to embark on a smaller mission now. Page 65. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sech v'bina להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני בצלמו. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני ישראל. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשני בן חורים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam פוקח עברים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam מלביש ערומים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam מתיר אסורים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam זוקף כפופים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam רוקח הארץ על המים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשה לי כל צורכי. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam המכין מצעדי גבר. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam עוזר ישראל בגבורה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam עוטר ישראל בתפארה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam הנותן לאוהב כוח. Then we're going to continue on page 72.
What page did you say?
72. Little tzaddik katamar, 4 lines from the bottom.
Tzaddik katamar yivrach ki yeres ba'levanon yizgah shetzulim b'veit Adonai bechazron Eloheinu yavrichu
And we'll pay tribute to Psalm number 30 on page 81. This is the psalm that tells you no matter how bad it gets, tomorrow is another day, and you can go to sleep crying and wake up joyful. הפכתם מספרי למחולי, פיתחת שקי ותעזרני שמחה, למען יזמך כבוד ולא ידום, אדוני אלוהי לעולם עודך. And we end this section with Mourner's Kaddish, page 82. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעולמה דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה וזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולמי עולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירון ביומה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל אמרו.
Amen.
And you are invited to rise for the beginning of Pesukei de Zimra, Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch oseh v'reshit, Baruch omer v'yosef, Baruch ozer u'mekayim, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch meshalem zachar tov l'reah, Baruch chai la'ad, v'kayam lanetzach, Baruch podeh u'matzil, Baruch Shemo. And 3 lines from the bottom. Yachid chei ha'olomim melech mishabachim for dead Shemo HaGadol, Baruch atah Adonai melech mehulal batishbachot. We continue on page 85, and you may be seated. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu la'ar kodsho. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu la'ar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romimu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romimu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu la'ar kodsho. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu la'ar kodsho. We're going to continue on page 92. And we're going to take the second set of 4 lines, that's 5 through 8, if you're counting down from the top. The line starting, Lo se hashemayim bitvuna. And we'll do 4 lines there, and then we're going to skip to the last 4 lines. Lo se hashemayim bitvuna ki le'olam chasto Mayim ki le'olam chasto, Lo se'orim gedolim ki le'olam chasto, Et hashemesh lemem shelit bayom ki le'olam chasto, down sher b'shifleinu charlanu ki le'olam chasto, vayifrekeinu mitzarenu ki le'olam chasto, noten lechem lechol basar ki le'olam chasto, adulel hashamayim ki le'olam Chasto. And we are continuing on page 96. We're going to do the first couple of lines of Ashrei out loud together. We'll read Ashrei silently, and we'll finish out loud on the next page.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, Orelucha Sela.
Ashrei Am Shekacha Lo, Ashrei Am Shadonai Eloham, Tila LeDavid.
Tilat Adonai daber pi, v'varech b'asar Shem kol shol olam v'ed. Anachnu nevarech yah, ve'adav yad olam. Hallelujah.
And at the bottom of page 97, 2 lines up. Yimloch Adonai li'olam, Elohai Tzion, Lidor v'ador. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. This is the section with all the hallelujahs, and it's called the small hallel. The big hallel is what we do on holidays. Page 99. 5 lines from the bottom. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim vayarem kerem li'amo tehila lecho chasidav livnei Yisrael al kirova. Hallelujah, hallelujah. And on page 100, in the middle section at the little box. Hallelujah, hallelujah, v'tzil tzulei shama. Hallelujah, hallelujah, v'tzil tzulei truah. Kol hanshama hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanshama hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. And on page 101, you're invited to rise. We're in the first paragraph, 3 lines down. L'cho Adonai hagedula v'hagevura v'hatiferet v'netzach v'hahod ki chol v'shamayim u'va'aretz l'cho Adonai Hamalacha v'haminaseh l'chol rosh. And we're going to stay standing for just a minute. On page 102, the marching version of the Song of the Sea, the second section. Az yashir Moshe et bnei Yisrael et hashira hazot l'Adonai v'yomeru le'imor ashir l'Adonai ki ga'o ga'a sus v'rav rama v'yam aziv zimraya v'yehi lishua Ze'eli v'anvehu Elohei aviv yarom menhu Adonai ish milchama Adonai shemo Margavot paro v'chelo yarav hayam U'mivcha shel ishav tib'u v'yam su. And we will continue on page 104. You may be seated for a brief shining moment. You'll be up again soon. The top of the middle section. Ilufinu male shira, shira kayamu, shonen rina kamon, amon galab. Ilufinu shonenu rina kamon, kamon galav. Ilufinu male shira, shira kayam. Ushonenu rina kamon, kamon galav, kamon galav, kamon galav. And we continue on page 105. At the end of the first paragraph, 3 lines up from the bottom of the first paragraph. Nahalechon shebechachon v'varechachon v'varech Hashem kodshecha k'amor leDavid borchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol karovai et Shem kodsho ha'el b'tatzumot uzecha hagadol b'kvod shemecha hagibor lanetzach v'hanora b'noratecha hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa. Third paragraph, 105, Shochinad.
Shochinad maro v'kadosh shemo.
Shochinad maro v'kadosh shemo.
V'chadu radanu tzadikim Adonai v'yesharim navatihila b'vil shalim nidalav v'divrei tzadikim nidbarach v'vilshon chassidim nidromam v'kelev kedoshim tikadash v'machalot rivot amchavit Yisrael. V'hodol halal shabeach v'vel b'meim lehadel v'rech lalel lekalis ha'kol divrei shirot v'tishbechot David ben Ishai avdecha meshichecha.
You are invited to rise, page 106, Yishtabach.
Yishtabach zivcha halad makin l'elmach B'racha Adonai me'atav yad olam baruch Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
El melech adonai tishbachot el ahodot Adonai nivlachot habachem b'zivrizim lamelech elachei olamim.
Amen.
Yidgadav Hashem mirabah.
Amen.
Yalmach divrach dirvavudei v'yamelech malchutei
B'chayechon u'vyomechon
V'chayidecho beit Yisrael Bagala V'vizman kariv librel
Amen.
Yehi shmei rabba mevorach Li'olam lo me'omaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach V'yitpavir t'ma v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei dekudeshah
B'richu.
V'yehila min kol birlachada v'shirata
Tush b'chata v'nechemata
Damiran b'yalma v'brel.
Amen. We're at the top of page 107 for the Baruch.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamivorach.
Baruch Adonai Amvorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamivorach le'olam va'ed.
You may be seated. Please join me in the beginning of the first of 2 blessings before the Shema. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam. Yotzer
Or
or
Uvarei
uvarei
Choshech,
Oseh
Oseh Shalom, Uvarei et HaKol. We continue to the bottom of the page on our own.
HaKadosh HaBaruch Yishabaruch HaBaruch HaKadosh Karmai Kol. Inkekecha vinzuladecha, Heavens v'dachal midomelach, Inkekecha Eloheinu v'olam hazeh, Vinzuladcha malkinu l'chei olam haba, Heavens v'dachal galim v'olam hazeh, V'yed melech hamozinu, L'chiyad hametim.
Page 108, Eladon.
El Adon al kol hamasim baruch mevorach befiko neshama gadol v'tuvo malei olam dad v'vuda sovevi moto Hamikael achayot hakodesh v'nedai v'chavod olam merkavo zechut umishor lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chevodo Tovim me'orot shebara Eloheinu Yitzaram b'dad v'vitnahu v'askel koach u'gvura natan bahem v'yahod v'asim b'kerlev tevel Malay zehim v'vigim naga Na'eh zehim v'amechol ha'olam Semekim b'tzedam b'zazim b'voam Ozim b'yehim ha'rizon konam Pierre v'chavod no nimelishmo tzahal averina Lezecher malchudo Kara l'shemesh v'yizerachor Havehid gitzurat havana Shevach no nimlo Kol zilam ha'arom Tiferet v'gedula Zvavim yofanim v'chayot ha'kodesh.
We read the top 2 paragraphs on page 109 to ourselves. We're on page 110.
Kulam hovim, kulam bilurim, kulam giborim, v'cholam osim b'ma v'rabetzon gona, v'cholam bokim et b'hem, b'gulu jalu t'havraha, v'shivaho v'ziraha, v'bach m'shavachim, v'mfarim ha'retzim, v'magdishim, v'mahamlichim, et shem ha'elam ha'gadol, ha'gim v'hanora ha'gadol, Binachad huah, safav avnima, kiddush aglaham gechadonim avim b'girah. Kadosh, 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 Adonai tzivahot, melech haaretz kivodo. V'avadim v'chayot ha'kodesh raj gado, v'nasim l'mazravim, v'madam shavachim v'yomrim. Baruch Kavod Adonai B'Komo Leil Baruch Militein Ur L'Melech Hamelech Or Chadash Al Zion Ta'ir V'nizgeh Cholanu Meher Alei Hara Or Chadash Al Zion Ta'ir V'nizgeh Cholanu meir alei hara, Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo,
Yotzer HaMe'ora.
Amen. The second blessing before the Shema is on page 111, Ahava Rabbah.
Ahava Rabbah Avdanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Echem Elah Gdola V'Tera, Chamad Aleinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Ba'avur Avodeinu, Shebarchu V'cha, Shebarchu V'cha, Avinu Malkeinu, V'atilam Chulkei Chayim, K'dichaninu Lamedeinu, Avinu Avaracham, Merachim Rachim Aleinu, V'dein V'libeitzu Lehavim, divrei Talmud Toratecha B'Ahava B'Ha'irenu B'Toratecha B'Damik Libeinu B'Mitzvotecha V'Yachei Livavinu V'Yachava V'Lira Et Shemecha V'Lo Nevo V'Olam Va'ed V'Lo Nevosh V'Olam Va'ed
Ki v'shem kodshecha Hagadol hanora v'tachnu Nagila v'nismecha
Nagila v'nismecha v'yeshuatecha V'avienu l'shalom
Tzitzit.
Me'yareba kanivodaret V'dolicheinu kamimiyu le'yarteinu Ki elimo el yeshuodata Uvanu v'charita mi'olam elashon V'keiravdanu V'shimcha gadol Selah Be'emet Li'odo lecha V'li'acherecha Be'yahava Baruch Adonai Habacher b'yama Yisrael b'yahava
112.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad V'ahaveta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha v'chol me'orecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinada b'vanecha v'dibahart bam v'shivdecha b'beitecha v'lechtecha b'derech v'shokvecha v'komecha v'kashardam le'odayatecha v'yedodavahod minenecha v'chedavdam v'mezuzot beitecha v'visharecha.
And the next two paragraphs, quickly and quietly.
Adonai Lechem Emet
V'yatziv nachon v'kayam v'yashav v'n'man v'avuv v'n'achman.
V'davadahu gabuz magav v'chisalachar machudah v'emunat l'kayamet.
You may release the tzitzit.
Mahakenu melech avodeinu goleinu kohel avodeinu tzveinu tzoyeshu adeinu Odinu mazileinu melam shemecha
114.
Emet, 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 atahu rishon.
Emet, 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 emet,
emet,
v'atahu
acharon. Uvi baladecha, ilanu melech, melech oel Moshiach. Uvi baladecha, ilanu melech, melech oel Moshiach.
Mimitzrayim galtanu.
Tilo lel Yahon, Baruch mivorach, Moshe b'nei Yisrael lechanu shirach, B'simcha rabba v'amilchulah.
You are invited to rise.
Mi chamocha ba'ilim Adonai, Mi chamocha
Darba kodesh norati lo sefer lev.
Shira chadasha shebechlu gerim l'shimchas v'dayam. Yachad kulam hadovim eichu v'yamrel. Adonai Eloh le'olam va'ed. So Israel, kulma be'ezrat Israel, v'ledei kudumelach, Yehuda v'Yisrael. Kol aleinu, Adonai tzvaot shemo Kiddush Yisrael. Baruch Adonai.
Baruch Baruch Shemo.
Yisrael.
The Amidah is said silently and standing from page 115, A or B. That's up to you. Skip page 116. We'll get that in the repetition. And then continue 117 to 120. It's a silent Amidah. You can fill your heart with your thoughts. If you need more time for your individual Amidah, please take the time to do so, or you can join us on page 115A for the beginning of the reader's repetition of the Amidah. You can remain seated for a little bit.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elokei avoteinu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chazanim Tovim v'Gonei HaKol, v'Zacher Chasdei Avot, V'Mevi Goel Livnei V'Lehem, V'Mahan Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozel Moshiach U'Magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Avraham, Hadar Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechimiti Mahata Rav L'Hoshia, Morid Hata, Mechagel Chayim Bechesed, Mechayim Edim Mirachamim Rabim, Samech Nafim Ve'Ravech Olim, Umadir Asurim, Umikayim Emunadav, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha B'Givuro, Umida Melach, Melech Mimi, Umichael, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'nemanat Alachayot Medim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechei HaMetim, Nikadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, Gishem shemakdishim Adam, B'shmei Marom, Kagadu v'yad nevi'echa, V'garazeh el zeh ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Melech haaretz kivod. Hasbi karash gadol, Hadir v'chazak, Mashbim kol, Min nasim l'umat tzirafim, L'umatam Baruch Yom Mehiru, Baruch Kivod Adonai Mimkomo. Mimkom chamakinu tovia, V'etim loch aleinu, K'mechakim anachnu lach, Madahoidim loch b'tzion. B'karol b'yameinu, L'lahamed tishkon. Tidgadad, Tidgadad, B'dach Yerushalayim yirlecha, L'dor v'dor, L'nitzach nitzachim. V'einenu tirena, Tirena malchutecha, Kadavar ha'amar, B'shirei uzecha, V'einenu tirena, Tirena malchutecha, Kadavar ha'amor, B'shirei uzecha, Ayedei David, Ayedei David, Ayedei David, Meshiach tzidkecha, Ayedei David, Ayedei David, Ayedei David, Meshiach tzidkecha. Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Melchei Tzion, L'dor v'dor, Hallelujah. L'dor v'Adonai gidgalecha, L'netzach netzach v'neshadecha nagdish, Shivchacha ohen mipino Moshe lamed, Ki hamelech v'kadosh ata, Baruch ata Adonai, Baruch v'ruch Shemo, Ha'el HaKadosh. You may be seated. We continue on page 117. Yismach Moshe b'matnat chagagi even neman gaharat alo Kelil Tiferet Bero Shana Dada V'Yamna Levanecha Al Har Sinai Shnei Luchot Avarim Horid B'Yado V'Chatuv Bahem Shemirat Shahabar V'Chatuv Bahem Shemirat Shahabar V'Chatuv Bahem Shemirat Shahabar V'Chatuv B'Toratecha V'Shamru B'nei Yisrael Et HaShabbat L'asod et HaShabbat V'Dorot HaMirid Olam Beini uvein B'nei Yisrael Odi le'olam Beini uvein B'nei Yisrael Odi le'olam Ki sheshet yamim Asa Adonai Et HaShamayim V'et haaretz V'yom hashvi Shabbat v'yinavash V'yom hashvi Shabbat v'yinavash V'lo nidadav Adonai Eloheinu l'gerz of Eloheinu cha'adol ma'kin l'dei v'zihilim V'gam menucha dolash k'nu ha'rehilim K'li Yisrael Amcha ha'didato b'yavaha L'zer Yaakov Asher b'macharda Ha'hamik ha'desh shvi Kulam yizbiru v'yidagelu mitzuvecha V'ashvi ratzita bo v'kidashdo Chem nad'habim ha'tagarata Zecher l'ma'aseh v'reshim Eloheinu v'le'avoteinu Ritzei v'mluchateinu Kadesheinu b'mitzvotecha V'teichel keinu b'toratecha Sabeinu b'tzuvecha V'samcheinu b'shuvatecha V'taher libeinu Yodecha be'emet V'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu V'yachova u'v'ratzah Shabbat kodechecha V'yadu chova Yisrael V'kadeshei shemecha Baruch Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
V'kadesh HaShabbat.
Page 118.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'macha Yisrael V'nefel Adam v'hashem V'dov dalim v'irbetecha Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'macha Yisrael V'nefel Adam v'hashem V'dov dalim v'irbetecha U'tefilatam V'yava v'yava v'go b'ratzon V'liratzon amid avodat Yisrael Amecha u'tefilatam V'yava v'yava v'go b'ratzon V'liratzon amid avodat Yisrael Amecha Ritzei V'techezena eineinu L'shochos yom rachamim Baruch Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
Hamachaz shechinat l'tzion
Amen.
Mohadim anachnu lach Atav kilach rachamecha v'merachim gilot hamachazadecha Pe'olam kivinu lai V'yahog l'amid brach gidvam shimcha makan tzamid le'olam v'ed V'chol ha'chaim yadu chazela V'yalu ad shimcha Beth Emet El Shadin Zvatinu Zela Barach, Ata Adonai. Ata Shem Chalacham Elodo.
Bottom of 119.
Eloheinu v'le'avodeinu, barchim l'baracha, ha'mishlesh b'torah, g'vaydim Moshe avdecha, ha'murami b'yaron v'anav, k'arim ha'mdoshecha g'amur. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Yair Adonai, Banav Elecha V'chuneka. Is Adonai, Banav Elecha, V'yasehim Lecha Shalom.
Page 120.
Sim
Sim.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha Sim Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha Lehin V'chesed V'rachamim Aleinu Galcha Yisrael Amecha V'cheinu Aveinu Kulanu Ki'echad B'yor Panecha Sim Shalom Sim Shalom Dava Uracha Ba'alav Sim Shalom Dava Uracha Kivi Arbanecha Nadadalanu Adonai Eloheinu Dorot Chayil Yahavat Chesed Tzedakah V'racha V'chachamim V'chayim V'choy V'shalom Sim Shalom Sim Shalom Dava Uracha Ba'alav Sim Shalom Dava Uracha V'tov Beinecha Levarech Et Amecha Et Amcha Yisrael B'chol Eitu B'chol Shah B'shlomecha Sim Shalom Sim Shalom Dava Uracha Ba'alav Sim Shalom Dava Uracha Baruch Adonai Hamivarech Adamo Yisrael B'Shalom.
And we bid a fond adieu to Shacharit on page 138 with Kaddish Shalem. Amen.
Yom Hadivrach Udev Mechlach Udev Chechot Mechot V'Chadach Beit Yisrael B'Aglav Yizban Kariv V'Yimrel
Amen. Yeheshmei Rabba Mevorach L'olam Olam Me'omaya Yitbarach
Yitbar Yishtabach Yitbar Yitbar Manasseh V'David David Al Shevei D'Kodesham
Brechu
Elam Mikom B'Chadav V'Shivadav B'Chadav Nechmatav Amram Ma'avei Yimrel
Amen.
Yitgabel Zodon V'Odon Yisrael Kadav Ohon V'Shmaiha V'Yimrel
Amen.
Yishtam Rabbi Shemai V'Chaim Alinu V'Akol Yisrael V'Yimrel
Amen.
V'aseh Shalom B'Mamav V'yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yalko Yisrael V'Yimrel Amen.
Shikoch. You may be seated for a little bit. We're going to begin the Torah service on page 139.
Ein kamacha v'Elohim Adonai v'in k'ma'asecha malechudecha malechut kol olamim v'memshadecha b'chodor v'ador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imlach v'elahava'er Adonai Osiamo Yitein, Adonai Yivarech, et Amo V'Shalom. Avarachamim, Hitiva V'Tzonecha,
את ציון.
תבנה
חומות ירושלים,
תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך
רם ונישא, אדון עולם.
ויבין סהרה ויאמר משה קומה
אדוני אויביך נוסו משנאיך ממך, כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, דבר אדוני ירושלים, ברוך שנתן תורה, תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה, תורה, ימו ישראל קדושתו. We turn to page 140, second paragraph, Be'anarachetz. Be'anarachetz, Rishmei Kadisha, Kadisha Yakira, Anoim Martushbechad, Be'anarachetz, Be'anarachetz, Rishmei Kadisha, Kadisha Yakira, Anoim Martushbechad, Yeravakadama, Betivtalivi, Beyoraita, Vinati Vishalim, Delibi, Veliba Becholama, Yisrael, Venavu Lechaim, Velishlam, Amen. We repeat after the cantor on page 141.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shema.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shema.
Gadol Adonai Iti, L'deromima Shema Yatedav, Lecha Adonai Hagilu,
Rav HaZivur, Rav HaTiferet, Netzach leHahod, Kivol HaShamayim u'Va'aretz, Shamayim u'Va'aretz, Chol Adonai HaMamlacha, Na'aseh Chol Romenu, Romenu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'hishtachavu, V'hishtachavu, Kadosh, Romenu, Romenu, Adonai Eloheinu,
והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
Well, you can go ahead and sit down now. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Just to remind you, a lot of interesting things have happened this week in the history of the Jewish people. Let's name some of them, shall we? Some of these you'll know, some of these, if you don't know, you should. Some of these are new to me too. On June 27th, 1902, the Yiddish newspaper, the Yiddische Welt, began publication in New York. Now this one, I expect some people to know. June 28th, 1967.
That's going to be Israel being, Jerusalem being reunified.
That's it. The old city of Jerusalem was united with the new city. Well, I can't say it's not a divided city. June 29th, the Ohavei Zion, the Lovers of Zion, an American Zionist organization, was organized. On the 30th, it's an honor to Fay, we'll skip that. July 1st of 1879, Romanian Jews were granted political equality. Let's hear it for the Romanians. July 2nd, 1871, the Anglo-Jewish Association was founded. I don't think they're around so much anymore. And today's the 3rd, July 3rd, 1475. Oh, I remember the book signing. The first complete edition of Jacob Ben Asher's code, the Arba'at Turim, was published in 1475. That's one of the commentaries that you'll see around the Talmud. Okay. We had an interesting early Torah study this morning. We tried to make it available to as many people as possible, so we had it live streamed, we had it on Zoom, and we had people here. I don't think we're going to do that again. The only person who joined us on Zoom was my wife from Texas, and I expected a couple more there. And it's just awkward to be talking to the screen, talking to the people. But I think it was worth doing, worth trying out. And as much as it was early Torah study, it means it's Simcha Shabbos, so let's hear it for the people who have birthdays, anniversaries, or happy events in the month of July. July the 1st, Kate Lovinger and Paulie Schechter. July the 3rd, Julius Ahrens and Patricia Robinson. July the 6th, Ruth Aronson, Sharon Illians, and Ken Levin. Yay. July 12th, Fortunate Richard. July 15th, that's Bastille Day, is that right? 14th? It's the day after Bastille Day, right? July 15th, Sandra Harp and Alan Myers. July 18th, E. Marshall Levy. July 19th, Larry Buff. And July 25th, Richard Cohen, who we just saw last week, along with his lovely family. So, and as far as anniversaries are concerned, July 2nd, Howard and Nikki Applebaum. July the 4th, Ed and Georgette Davis and Robert and Laurice Singer. It's Bob and Laurice's 50th this year. July 14th, that's Bastille Day. Is Jack and Ruth Zakowski. And July 25th, Howie and Charlene Schwed. So for all the people out there who are celebrating the happy moments of their lives, Siman Tov, Mazel Tov, and Siman Tov, and Siman Tov, Siman Tov, and Mazel Tov,
Mazel Tov, and Siman Tov, Siman Tov, and
Mazel Tov, and Mazel Tov, and Siman Tov, Yehelanu,
Yehelanu,
Yehelanu, Ulecha Yisrael, Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulecha Yisrael, David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'kayam. sending out all kinds of positive vibes. I hope you're catching them. Today's Parsha is Pinchas. It's got a wealth of material for discussion, as we found out this morning, most of us already knew it. But I'm going to change it a little bit now to discuss one thing that we didn't talk about. If I'm not mistaken, yeah. I'm going to share something with you from my previous life. Most of you know the kind of work that I did before I got into this line of work. Now, some of you may know that at one point in my previous career, I was on a TV show called The Gong Show. And a lot of people, upon hearing this, have asked me over the years a lot of questions. Like, Rabbi, what was Chuck Barris really like? And a few wanted to know, did you meet Gene the Dancing Machine? Everybody remember Gene the Dancing Machine. But most people wanted to know the answer to the deeper philosophical question, Rabbi, did you get gonged? So there's two things I want to let you know. Because as your rabbi, I am sworn to teach and inform. I'm taking this opportunity to tell you first that no one who was a legitimate contestant on the show got gonged. The only people who got gonged on the Gong Show were professional actors in the Television Actors Union. At the time, it was just AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and now it's SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild, that merged with them. They would write up little skits, and they knew they were going to get gonged. That was the whole point. So they wanted to see how long they could keep the skit going. And I remember being backstage and seeing them, they finish one and they go right off and work on the next one for the next day. So nobody got gonged that was a legitimate contestant. No matter how good the professionals were, they got gonged. And no matter how bad the legitimate contestants were, they got a score from the three judges. Now, people ask me, who were your three judges? What famous people? Well, the first, my three judges, see who you remember these people are. Mabel King, she was from the show What's Happening. That's the one that had Jimmy Walker on it. Mate. Okay, so that's one for the books. Jamie Farr was another one of my judges. For those of you who remember Math, he was Klinger. And the fabulous comedian Mort Saul. I got 2 9s and an 8. And I don't remember who gave me what. I think Mabel King gave me the 8, but it was a score of 26 out of 30, a respectable score. But I did not win. Now, there was a group of these 5 African-American women who wore blue gowns and crystal heels. They were called the McPherson Sisters, and they scored a perfect 30. And all they did was sing a song called I Got the Music in Me. That was made famous by the Kiki D band. Don't Let It Get You Down. I think one of the McPherson sisters might have been Mother McPherson because she looked a little older. But they outscored me, so they won. I wound up with a consolation prize, an assortment of home improvement products from DAP, the people who made spackle a household word. I don't know whatever happened to the McPherson sisters. I looked, I couldn't find them. Nothing comes up in Google. They kind of just disappeared. Now, why am I mentioning this today? Because in a loose and free associative way, that really applies, I guess, just to me, I related the McPherson sisters today to today's Parsha. There are 5 sisters in today's Parsha. So let's take a look at the non-singing, non-dancing 5 daughters of Slofchad, which doesn't work so well on television. B'not Slofchad, shiru. These are the young women who came to Moses with a question. And it's a serious question. They say, our father died in the wilderness. Now, why did they start with that? Didn't everybody who left Egypt die in the wilderness unless they were under a certain age, 20? They continue. And he wasn't part of the group of Korach that testified against God. They wanted to make sure Moses knew and understood that their father was an honest man. A man of stand-up character, not associated with the bums that tried and tested Moses and challenged Moses' authority. Their father, Shlofchad, obeyed Moses. He didn't die because of Korach's sins. Whatever sins he died for were his own, and then here comes the point. They say, our fathers left no sons. Now, this doesn't have the same ring to modern ears that it did in the biblical times. In biblical times, sons inherited. Daughters got married off or stayed with their father's house to be taken care of. But now, we're not talking about an ordinary inheritance. We're talking about getting a portion of the Holy Land. Once the Israelites arrive there, it's going to be divided up. Not getting a portion of the land is tantamount to saying that 5 Jewish human beings were going to be disenfranchised for no crime whatsoever. There would be no place for them. They would disappear like the McPherson sisters, and it would not be right. See, the land is such an important, it's practically a character in the book. When they talk about the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, I mean, there's such a fanatic attachment to it. I don't mean fanatic in a bad way. I mean, there's a visceral, emotional tie, and especially if you read the book, you can't miss it. It's just a tremendous connection. And to the people who first heard these stories, it was very, very important. Distribution of the land dictated wealth and status. It reflected who you were in Israelite society. And when the ancient audience heard that a character was from a certain area, they had their associations all set. Benjaminites were rough and tumble. The Judeans were the most civilized. Well, the Judeans wrote the history, so I guess they're going to be. And every 50 years or so, every 50 years, according to the Torah, the land would go back to its original tribal owners as well as could be determined, to ensure that the future generations would have a chance to make something of themselves and the land. A new chance is given every 50 years. The land was ours to use and profit from. Was it usufruct? And there's a legal term for that. Yeah. Anyway, but it ultimately belonged to God. The land would be redistributed, and a new generation of sons would inherit. And you couldn't do that if there were tribal claims from both the sons and the daughters, or more specifically, husbands and wives. You couldn't trace it back to who it belonged to before if you did both strands, so they just through a single parent. And that parent in those days was the father, the son of the last inheritor. And that parent in those days was okay, I'm sorry I said that. And so to this day, we have our Hebrew names given with the patronym. I mean, for years and years and years, it was Ploni ben Almoni, so-and-so son of what's his name. And in the last 30, 40 years or so, many people, myself included, also identify ourselves as the son or daughter of our father and mother. So it'd be Ploni ben Almoni ve'almonit, so-and-so son of what's his name and who's she. But if we are talking about getting the land back to its original tribe, inheritance through both sides would not make that possible. So when the daughters say, our fathers left no sons, they're saying, Moses, we are going to die unless you think of a way out of this. And Moses doesn't know what to think. In a way, it's got a parallel to a couple of weeks ago where a guy was brought up to him who had been collecting wood on Shabbat, ostensibly to make a fire, and Moses didn't know what to do. So now, as then, Moses goes into the tent of meeting and asks God what he should do. And now, as then, Moses got an answer. And not just an answer, but as in all these cases where Moses is truly perplexed, God gives a specific answer and states the general principle, and then abstracts to a larger case. There, in the case of the wood gatherer, the man himself was stoned to death for forgetting the commandments, and the overreaching principle of how to remember the commandments was spelled out in the passage about the tzitzit, the fringes. That's how you're supposed to remember the commandments. Now, because one guy forgot the commandment not to light a fire on Shabbat, nobody would ever forget the commandments again, as long as they wore the tzitzit to remind them of it, the fringes. And no one else would be punished as the wood gatherer was in that other story. And there it also abstracted into a larger principle. And whenever you have one of these things, it ends with a little seal series of words. Seal meaning like a gushpanka or like sealing wax. You finish it, and they all end with, as God commanded Moses. Here, in the case of Shlofchad sisters, God spells out all the rules about inheriting when there are no sons. If there's no sons, daughters inherit. If there's no daughters, the deceased brothers inherit. And if there's no brothers, then the father's brothers, his uncles on his father's side, and if there's none of them, then it goes to the next of kin. But it's spelled out very clearly who gets the land. And it more or less covers all the bases for that time and place. And again, there's a closing statement. These are the laws as commanded by God to Moses. The Torah was in its way a radical document ensuring life for all, men and women. It was an advancement in human rights and an example to us all to look for ways to make sure that those among us who are being denied rights get their rights. But it was done in a way that also ensures that the framework, the system remains intact, and that basic rights for all were not violated. So it wasn't just you get this, it was everybody listen up, this is how it goes. And that's the way it went. And I guess the point here is that the Shlofchad sisters were worried about getting ganged. Built into the system, however, was a way to solve this, a mechanism that protected them and protected the system that they were in, just as legitimate contestants were protected from being ganged. A way was found to guard the Shlofchad sisters' rights and retain the holy status of the land they were going to inherit. But is it enough? In our day, of course, women's rights do not depend on having no brothers. What's progressive in one era doesn't go far enough in another. But I found a quote from Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy. He said, "The nature of injustice is that we may not always see it in our own times. The generation that wrote and ratified the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment did not presume to know the extent of freedom in all of its dimensions, so they entrusted to future generations a charter protecting the right of all persons to enjoy liberty as we learn its meaning. When new insight reveals discord between the Constitution's central protection and received legal stricture, a claim to liberty must be addressed." He's saying, this is it for now. If we learn something else later on, that can change it. It's adaptable. But we're always looking for more liberty for more people in all circumstances. Now, whatever you think of the decision of that of Judge Kennedy, you have to admit he sounds kind of rabbinic, maybe even biblical. Deuteronomy 17 says, "If a case is too baffling for you to decide, be it a controversy over homicide, civil law, or assault, matters of dispute to your courts, you shall promptly repair to the place that the Lord your God will have chosen and appear before the Levitical priest or the magistrate in charge at that time and present your problem. When they have announced to you the verdict, you shall scrupulously follow their instructions." Apparently, even Moses knew that the Torah he was given to the people wouldn't have every situation solved. Judgment would be needed down the line to ensure justice be served to the people in the next generation. Okay, I'm getting the feeling here the gong is coming up. We're going to end it up here. But if you've been able to see here some of the underlying factors that make this short episode a highly charged dramatic dilemma, if you can see this as more than just a question about real estate, if you can look at the story of Banot Shlofchad and see just what it is at stake, I feel like I finally won the gong show. Shabbat Shalom.
Just think that you won the gong show, it might have changed your whole course of your life.
Yeah, I think about it every day.
Well,
What did sisters do?
Sisters, they got some, I forget exactly what, it was much better than the DAP kit. I kept that kit for years. I used the spackle. Home improvement products. Okay, now. Okay. We are on page, whoa, you okay? The book is Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 26, verse 52. I didn't say the page yet because I'm still looking for it.
924.
I think it's 924. Yep. And here, we're getting into the description of how to divvy up the land once we get there. We are on page 924 in the Big Red Chumash, verse 52.
Hakol havu goder lehnu chavu la Torah Yamod Kohen Yamod Ruvain ben Mira Kohen Kohen Ruchtan Tal Torah Lemos Avik Rishazaho
ואתם מדליקים לנו אליכם, חיים כולכם היום.
ברוך הוא אדוני המבורך,
היום ועד.
אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני, נותן התורה.
אמן.
Amen. V'daber Adonai el Moshe lemar Laile Techalek haaretz benachala b'mizbar shemo larav Tar benachalato v'lamad tamid nachalato Ish levi v'godav yutat nachalato Ach b'goral yichalek et haaretz Lishmot matot avota min chalu Al bi'agoral techalek nachalato Bein rahav lihimat.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נוטה בתוכנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, נותן התורה.
Amen. Yamud Levi.
The second aliyah begins on page, at the same page, actually 924, with verse 57. And here we're starting to see the breakdown of the Levitical clans, the families that were Levites, that were not going to get any land, but they were still counted.
Yamud Yaakov ben Emmanuel Levi Levi.
Baruch Adonai HaBarak.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarak Le'olam Vaed. Baruch Ato Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amin. V'notan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ato Adonai.
Shmo.
Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Ve'ele Pikudei HaLevi. Le'mishbechodam le'gershon. Mishpachat HaGershoni likat. Mishpachat HaKati. Le'merari. Mishpachat HaMemari. Ele Mishpachot Levi. Mishpachat HaLivni. Mishpachat HaChevroni. Mishpachat HaMachli. Mishpachat HaMushi. Mishpachat HaKarchi. Ukahat Holidet Amram. V'shem Eshet Amram. Uchevet Bat Levi. Asher Yalda Ota LeLevi Mitzrayim. Vateda LeAmram. Et Aharon Vet Moshe. Vet Miriam Achotam. Vivalid LeAharon. Et Nadav Et Avihu. Et Elazar Vet Itamar. Vayamot Nadav Avihu. Bakrivchem Ish Zarali. Bakrivam Ish Zarali Fnei Adonai. Vayu V'Godim. Shlosha V'Esrim Elef. Vayu V'Godehem. Shlosha V'Esrim Elef. Kozachar Mi Ben Chodesh V'Mayla. Ki Hihi. Lahik Pagdu B'Toch B'nei Yisrael. Ki lo nitan lahem nachala b'toch b'nei Yisrael.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher notan lanu Torah emet, v'chei olam notah b'tzachinu. Baruch atah Adonai
Shemo.
noten haTorah.
Amen. Talmud Shlishi, Talmud Rivcha Michal Bat Shalom Menachem V'Sara Shlishi.
The third aliyah begins on page 925, and it's the end of the classification of the Levitical class, and then we have the Shlofchad girls.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Havara.
Baruch Le'rach Le'lam
Baruch Adonai Havara Le'lam V'hed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'cha banu mikol amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch Atah Adonai.
Shemo.
Noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Ele Pekudei Moshe Ve'elazar HaKohen Asher Bagdu Et Bnei Yisrael Barvot Moab Ayadin Yerecho Ve'ele Lo Yahish B'Pekudei Moshe Ve'Aharon HaKohen Asher Bagdu Et Bnei Yisrael B'Midbar Sinai Ki Amar Adonai Lahem Mod Yamutu B'Midbar V'lo Notar Mehem Ish Kim Kalev ben Yefune, V'Oshea ben Nun, V'Tikravna ben Otzlav Chad, Ben Chefer ben Gilad, Ben Machir ben Menashe, Mishpachat Menashe ben Yosef, Mishpachot Menashe ben Yosef, Ve'ele Shemot ben Otav, Machla Noah, V'Chagla Umalka V'Tirtza, V'Ta'amodna Lifnei Moshe, V'Lifnei Elazar HaKohen, V'Lifnei Hanisim v'chol haida, pedach ohel moed, leimar, avinu, midbar, midbar, v'lo haya, b'toch haida, hanoadim, al Adonai badad korach, ki v'chet homed, uvanim lo hayu lo, lama yigara shem avinu, b'toch mishpachto, ki ein lo bein, tana lanu achluza, b'toch ache avinu, v'yakriv Moshe, et mishpatahan lifnei Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. So, in the upcoming week is Rebecca's birthday. So she asked me if I would do a gematria for her. So I said, okay, after thinking about it for a while. But so there are two letters that comprise two Hebrew letters when put together, whose numerical value equates to her birthday. So whenever I do a gematria, I like to start there and see if I can make something of it before adding more letters to the pile. So those letters are Mem and Gimel. So those of you who know Ivrit will know how old she is right now, but I won't announce that yet. So Mem and Gimel, if you put those together, Mem and Gimel spells the word to me mug, like a mug of beer or a pretty mug. So I don't know about you and a mug of beer. It's lovely to see you, but I thought I'd go in a different direction, and I would switch the letters, Gimel and Mem, Gam. Gam in Hebrew means also, okay? Like, Gamani, also me. So what really is the essence of the word also? Also is a word of inclusion. It's a connecting word. I'm going somewhere, also I'm doing something. So it connects two things. It's a word of involvement, right? It's a word of connection. So I thought about you, Rebecca, and you are the word also is characteristic of who you are. You like to connect yourself to things. You like to be a part of things. When something comes up, also there's something additional. You like to insert yourself to make sure you're part of the community, part of your family, and a part of your friends' lives. So I just want to say also, Mazel Tov to you on your birthday. And for those of you who don't know, the gematria for Gam is 43. So there it is. Secret's out of the bag, okay? So Mazel Tov to you, Simon Tov and Mazel Tov, and have a wonderful 43rd birthday. You're welcome. Yamon. Yitzchak ben Pinchas, Revi'i.
The fourth Aliyah is chapter 27, verse 6, which is on page 927. And this is God's answer to Moses when he brings the case of the Benot Tzlofchad.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMamurah.
And,
Baruch Adonai Morach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol HaYamim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor kein Benot Tzlofchad dovrot Naton titein lahem achuzat nachala betoch achei avihem Vavarta et nachala avihen lahen Vel b'nei Yisrael to daber lemor Ish ki yamut uvein ein lo Vavarta nachalato levito Viv ein lo bat V'natatem nachalato lechav Vim ein lo achim V'nitatem nachalato lachei aviv Vim ein achim l'aviv V'nitatem nachalato l'sheira Hakarov elav Nemishbachto Vayarash ota Vayita livnei Yisrael L'chukat mishpat Kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe V'omer Adonai el Moshe alei El har ha'ovrim hazeh Orei et haaretz Asher natati livnei Yisrael V'rayita ota V'nesafta el amecha gam ata Kasher ne'esaf Aron achticha Kasher miritem bi B'midbar tzin B'merivat ha'eda Lakti sheni v'mayim le'ineihem heim Mi mirivat kadesh Midbar tzin
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu et Torato. Torat Emet v'chaya olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Yavot Chamishi.
The fifth Aliyah begins with verse 15. We just had something we didn't go into detail about, but God just told Moses he's going to die soon. So get things together. And what we're picking up here is the Moses asking God to, whoever succeeds me, make sure he's good at leadership. You'll see what I mean.
Yavot Mordechai ben Ruvain. Chamishi.
Big throw. Thank you.
Yeah. Right here. No, over here, Mark.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai
No.
HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'daber Moshe el Adonai lemor. Yivkod Adonai Elohei arucho l'chol basar. Ish aleida. Asher yetzei lifnehem. V'asher yavo lifnehem. V'asher yotzim. V'asher yivigim. V'lo tieh adat Adonai ka'atzon. Asher ein lahem ro'eh. V'omer Adonai el Moshe kach lecha. Et Yoshua ben Nun. Ish asher ruach bo. Samachta et yadcha alav. V'amadata oto. Livnei Elazar HaKohen, v'livnei kol ha'eda, v'tzivitu oto le'ineihem, v'natata mehodcha alav, l'man yishmu, kol adat b'nei Yisrael, v'livnei Elazar HaKohen, yamod, v'sha'alo b'mishpat ha'orim, ha'orim livnei Adonai, al pi yitzu, v'al biv yavohu, hu v'chol b'nei Yisrael, oto, ito, v'chol ha'eda, v'as Moshe, kasher tziva Adonai oto, v'yikach et Yoshua, v'amidehu, livnei Elazar HaKohen, v'livnei kol ha'eda, v'yismoch et yadav alav v'yitzavehu, kasher diber Adonai, v'yahad Moshe.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher natan lanu et Torat Emet v'chaya olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Ata Adonai
Shemo.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Yavot Shishi.
The sixth Aliyah is at the beginning of chapter 28. And from here, we're not going to finish this part because it's the triennial cycle. But what it's going to be is the establishment of the calendar, the sequence of holidays and things.
Yamod Dover Ben Yehuda, Shishi.
We read a lot of these as maftir for the holidays.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher bochar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
Amen. V'daber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Savet b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. Et karbani lachmi le'ishai. Reachni chochi. Tishmeru l'akriv li b'moado. V'amarta alehem zeh ishe. Asher takrivu l'Adonai. Kivasi b'nei shanat mimim shnayim layom. Ola tamid. Et hakebes ha'echad aseh b'boker. What? Et hakebes echad aseh b'boker. V'et hakebes ha'sheni ta'aseh ben ha'arbayim. V'asiri ta'ifa solet l'mincha. B'lulaha b'shemen katit revi'i tahin. Ola tamid. Asuya. Ola tamid. Asuya b'har Sinai l'reach nichoach. Ishe l'Adonai. V'niskal revi'i tahin. L'hakebes ha'echad. B'kadesh ha'seich nesech. B'kodesh ha'seich nesech. Shechar l'Adonai. V'hakebes ha'sheni ta'aseh ben ha'arbayim. Kiminchad ha'boker ch'nisko ta'aseh ishe reach nichoach l'Adonai. V'yom ha'shabbat shnei chavasim b'nei shanat mimim. Shnei asonim solet mincha b'lulav ha'shemen v'nisko. Olad shabbat b'shabbato. Allah tamid v'nizkar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
No, I don't have to.
Yamot Shvi.
You going to call her by name?
What?
Going to call her by name?
What?
Name.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Ari Ben Yehuda? Yamod Ari Ben Moshe Shvi'im.
We continue with verse 11 on page 930 and continues defining the calendar.
Baruch hu Adonai havarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam V'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
Wait a minute, now did I just lose it? Yeah, okay. Amen. Uvrashei chadoshechem takrivu Allah l'Adonai parim v'nei v'akar shnayim v'ayel echad kivasim b'nei shana shiva tamimim ushlisha esronim Ushlosha esronim sulat mincha b'lula v'shemen lapor e'echad ushanei esronim sulat mincha b'lula v'shemen la'ayel echad v'isaroni surround sulat mincha b'lula v'shemen la'kevas ha'echad olat reach ni'oach ishet l'Adonai v'niskechem chatzi hayin yeh lapor ushlishit chayin La'ayel u'revi'it ha'ayin l'kahin l'cheves yayin zot alat chodesh v'chodesho l'chodeshei hashana v'si'ir izin echad l'chtot l'Adonai l'chata l'Adonai al alad hatamid ye'aseh v'niskal.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen. We cover up the Torah.
Yikada Vikara Shemiraba. The Almighty Racharu Devia Melech Machute. Bechaye Chadav Yom Echad. Bechaye Echad Beit Israel. Bagala, Bagala. Levi's my Nari Vimrel. Amen. Yesh Meirah Mevorah. Li'olam Olam Be'almaya. Yitbarach. Yitbarach Vishtabach. Vitbar Vitma Vitnase Vitadar. Vitale Vitala. Shebede Kudishah. Leila Migo Birlachada Vishirada. Tushechada V'nechemata. Dami Rabbi Alma Vimrel. Amen.
While we're all standing, we'd like to give a prayer to people who need it. We're going to do the Misha Pera.
Misha Beirach Avoteinu Mikara Beracha Himoteinu. May the source of strength bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Beirach Imoteinu Mikara Beracha Avoteinu. Bless those in need of healing, with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Yamud Maftir, Yamud Nachum, and Eliezer Vester, Maftir Chazak.
You may be seated.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaBarach.
Baruch
Adonai Barach L'Olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher Bacha Banu Mikol Hamim. V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
Uvashecha doshechem takrivu Allah ladonai parim b'nei bakar shnayim v'ayil echad kivasim b'nei shana shiva tamimim ushlosha esronim suet mincha b'lula v'shemen lapor echad ushnei esronim suet mincha b'lula v'shemen la'ayil echad Yisron Yisron suet mincha b'lula V'shemen lekevas echad Allah reach ni'oach isha ladonai v'niskechem chatzi hahi yel lapor ushlosha ushlishi ayin la'ayel urevi'i ayin lekevas yayin ushlishi. Oh, v'zot Allah chodesh v'chodesho v'chodeshei hashana v'zi'ir v'zi'im echad l'chatot l'adonai al alat hatami yeyaseh v'yisrael.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
Yaman Makbia, Yaman Golel. V'zot Torah Asher Sam Moshe B'nei Israel Ami Adonai B'yad Moshe.
Okay. As the Torah is seated, you can be seated. Oh. Okay. It's not the regular Haftarah for Pinchas today, the way the calendar works out this year. This is the week we start the 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av. And as such, you have 3 Haftarot of what they call admonition that tell you how bad the people of Israel were. After Tisha B'Av, we talk about how steadfast and great they are. More like what we're used to. So, but today, Jeremiah is Mr. Doom and Gloom, yes. It's the first of 3 Haftarot of disaster, really. The reading is not connected to the Parsha by theme as like they usually are. The secondary function of the Haftarah is to set the mood from the reading up to the destruction of the temple and the first great exile through the period of consolation leading up to Rosh Hashanah. No prophet symbolized doom and gloom better than Jeremiah. He is credited with writing Eicha, the Book of Lamentations, as well, which describes the ruin of the temple and the degradation of the people. Our reading is the opening of the book of Jeremiah. It's a warning of bad things to come, no matter how well we're prepared for them, because the people have been unfaithful to God. So this is what they get. Page number 968.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo u'b'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Amen.
Divrei Yirmiyahu ben Chilkiyahu min haKohanim asher bananot be'eretz Binyamin asher hayad v'Adonai elav b'mei Yoshiyahu ben Amon melech Yehuda b'shlosh etzrei shana lemacho v'yehi Bimei Yehoyakim ben Yoshiyahu melech Yehuda atom ashtei esrei shana l'tzidkiyahu ben Yoshiyahu melech Yehuda ad galut Yerushalayim b'chodesh hachamishi vayehi dvar Adonai elai lemor b'terem etzarcha v'beten yidaticha Uveterem tetzei merechem ikdashticha navi lagoyim netaticha vayomar aha Adonai Elohim hine lo yadati daber ki na'ar anochi vayomer Adonai elai al tomar na'ar anochi ki Al kol asher eshlachacha telech veit, kol asher atzavcha tidaber, al tira mipnehem, ki itcha ani latzilecha neum Adonai, vayishlach Adonai et yado v'yaga al pi, vayomer Adonai elai hine natati dvarai beficha. Rei, hifkadeticha hayom hazeh, al hagoyim ve'al hamamlachot, lintosh ve'lintots, ve'ulahaviv, ve'laharos, livnot ve'lintoa. Vayehi dvar Adonai elai lemor, mata roeh Yirmiyahu, Vayomar, Makel Shaked Ani Roeh, Vayomer Adonai Elai, Hetavta Lirot, Ki shokedani al dvari lasoto. Vayhi devar Adonai Eli sheni lemor mataroev yomar. Sir nafuach ani roeh ufanav mipnei tzafona. Vayomer Adonai Eli mitzafon tipatach hara'al kol yoshvei haaretz. Ki hineni korei l'chol mishpechot mamlachot tzafon anum Adonai uva'u v'nadnu ish kiso petach sharei Yerushalayim v'al kol chomoteha tzaviv v'al kol arei Yehuda v'dibarti mishpatai otam al Koratam asher azavuni ve'katru le'elohim acherim yishtachavu lema'asei yedehem biata tezor matnecha ve'kamta v'dibarta alehem et kol asher anochi atzaveka al teichat mipneihem Penachitcha lifnehem, Yani hinei netaticha hayom, le'ir miptzar, ulamut barzel, ulachomod nechoshek, al kol haaretz lemachei, Yehuda letzareha, lechoaneha, ula'am haaretz. V'nilchamu elecha v'lo yuchlu lach ki tchaninu m'Adonai latzilecha v'yehi dvar Adonai Eli lemor haloch v'karatav b'oznei Yerushalayim lemor kol amar Adonai Zacharti lach esed nurayich, ahavat klulotayich, lechtech acharai bamidbar, be'eretz lo teruah. Kodesh Yisrael Adonai Reshit Vuato, kol ochlav yeshamu ra. Tavo Eleihem Neum Adonai Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Tzur Kol Olamim Tzadik B'chol Adorot El HaNeman HaOmer V'Yoseh Amdaber Kayem Shekol Devarav Emet V'Tzedek Neman Atahu Adonai Eloheinu V'nemanim devarecha, v'davar echad midvarecha, achor lo yeshuv rikam, ki el melech neman v'rachaman ata, baruch ata Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
ha'el haneman b'chol dvarav.
Amen.
V'chem al Tzion ki beit chayenu, v'lalu vad nefesh toshia b'mheira v'yameinu. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Mesamech Tzion bevanecha.
Amen.
Zamcheinu Adonai Eloheinu b'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha v'malchut Beit David Meshichecha b'mheira yavo v'yagel libeinu al kiso lo yeshev zar v'lo yinchalu od acherim et kvodo ki v'shem kodshecha nishpata lo shelo yechben neirot le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Magen David.
Amen.
Ala Torah v'al havodah v'al hanvi'im v'al yom haShabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu l'kedushav l'menucha l'chavod u'tifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach u'mvarchim otach yitbarech shimecha b'ficho chai tamid le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Mekadesh HaShabbat.
koach. Well, we're going to go back to our Siddur, to page 148, but before we read the last paragraph on the page is a prayer for our country. We did lose a soldier this week. It was Air Force Lieutenant Colonel James C. Willis, and let's keep him in mind as we pray for the welfare of the nation. Together, may this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore.
And let us
We
say,
Amen. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu milchama. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu milchama. V'nomar amen. Makor Chaim, source of all life, we ask for a quick end to hostilities around the world, foreign and domestic, and with the swift and safe return of our young men and women to their homes. Let us all say.
Amen.
Prayer for the state of Israel, whose government has now lasted a week. I didn't think it would.
They only thought it would last one day, but by a miracle, it might last 8 days.
Yeah, I think I know people who want to light the heads of everybody in there. So, on page 149, a prayer for the state of Israel. Shemaim. So Yisrael v'go'olo, Barech Medinat Yisrael, Reishit Smichad Gulatenu, Hagen Aleha ve'evrat chastecha, Ufros Aleha sukat shlomecha, Ushlach orcha v'yamitcha, Rosheha soreha v'yoetzeha, V'taknim be'etzat tova milfanecha, Chazek yidei meginei eretz kodshenu, V'antilei Eloheinu Yeshua, V'yater nitzachon teatrem, V'natata shalom ba'aretz, Simchat olam liyoshveha, Nomar Amen. We have a new month coming up at the end of next week, and we're going to bless it now.
Yeah.
So when it gets down to the part where we announce the month, Zev will say in Hebrew, Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av, and he'll tell you what day it's on, Friday night and Saturday. And you and I will read the English. The new month of Menachem Av will begin Friday night and Saturday. So that's our part. So listen up for it.
Yehi ratzon b'fanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, v'Elohei avoteinu, shetechadish aleinu, et hachodesh hazeh, l'tova v'livracha, titei lanu, choim harugim, v'titei lanu, chayim shel shalom, v'titei lanu, choim shel tova, v'titei lanu, chayim shel biracha, yehi ratzon b'fanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, v'Elohei avoteinu, shetechadish aleinu, et hachodesh hazeh, l'tova v'livracha. Chaim chaim shel parnasah, Chaim chaim shel chilud ha'azamat, Chaim chaim sheyesh bahem yirat shamayim v'yirat chen, yehi ratzon b'fanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, v'Elohei avoteinu, shetechadish Kadesh Aleinu et HaChodesh Hazeh L'tova v'livracha. Chaim Chaim she'en bahem busha, Chaim Chaim busha u'klima, Chaim Chaim she'lo v'chavod, Chaim Chaim she'lo v'chavod, Yehi ratzon mefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, shetechadesh aleinu et hachodesh hazeh l'tova v'livracha. Chaim Chaim zedehevanu ahavat Torah ve'yirat shamayim, Chaim Chaim she'imalu mishalot v'beinu letova omitzela yehi ratzon mevanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, shetechadesh aleinu et hachodesh hazeh l'tova v'livracha.
That doesn't get you to heaven, nothing will.
Misasa nisim lavodenu, v'galot habevnu l'chirut, v'galot hanu b'karav, v'kabetz yidachenu me'arba kadvad haaretz. Chaverim, kol Yisrael, Chaverim, kol Yisrael, v'nomor amen. Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av, yeh b'yom Shabbat Kodesh, haba aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael l'tova.
The new month of Menachem Av together will begin on Friday night and Saturday. May it hold blessings for us and for all the people Israel.
Yechad Shehu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Aleinu v'Okolamo Beit Yisrael, L'chaim u'lishalom.
Amen.
L'sasod u'l'simecho.
Amen.
L'yeshua u'l'nechama v'nomar Amen.
And you may be seated for this next exciting adventure. We are on page 151, and we have our chief astrologist to help us out here.
Ashrei Yochvei Veitecha Odecha Lelukasela.
Ashrei am shekach lo, Ashrei
Shadonai Eloha. Tila David Armim Kalo Kaka Melef Averkashim Kaleo Lamai. Oh Yom Avarkecha Ilalashim
Leolam va'ed.
Gadol Adonai Mekulo Me'ol V'litula Toei Cheker.
Dor lidor shabach ma'asecha, techa yakidu.
Hadar Kefo Chodecha V'difrei Niflotecha Sika. Susratecha Yomeru Ugelula Sabrena. Zekeraf to Kaya Biu V'sikadachayr Aneinu. Anunachum Adonai Erepanu Chased. Tov Adonai Lako Veracham Avoko Masaf.
Adonai kol ma'asecha v'hasidecha yivachucha.
Kevo Mohu Takayo Meru Gevuru Takayeta Beru.
Lehodia livnei adam gevurota, uchivod hadar malchuto.
Mohu Taka Mahuko Olamim Umen Shaftaka Bekodor Fador.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
Eine Koeleka Yasaberu, the Atanote Lahem, Eroklam Beito.
פותח את ידיך, ומשביע לכל רצון.
Sadiq Adonai Bekol Tifrakav, Vekasi Beko Maasaf.
ואדוני לכל קורא, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
Ritzon Yav Yaseh, Ve'eshavatam Ishma Vyoshie.
אומר אדוני את כל אוהביו, ואת כל רשעים ישמיד.
Tila Adonai Yedaber Pi, Vivareko Basar, Shem Kochol Elam Vaed.
אנחנו נברך יה מאתה מהעולם. Hallelujah. Page 153.
Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, King is God, Shem Olevado, Adam Eretz, Vishamayim, Vayarek Eret Le'amon, Tila Lechol, Asidav, B'nei Yisrael, Amirovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah.
Mis Merletahavin, Havil Adonai B'nei Havil Adonai Kavavos, Havil Adonai Kavod Shemo, Yishach Havil Adonai B'chad Rakodesh, Kol Adonai El Hamayim HaKavod Hirim, Adonai El May Rabim, Kol Adonai Ba'koach, Kol Adonai B'hadar, Kol Adonai Shever Ramazim, Hashem Be'adonai Zezanon, Bayar Kidem Kemo Eged Levanon V'Sirion, Kemo Ben Remim, Kol Adonai Hatzil Avotesh, Kol Adonai Yamibar, Yahil Adonai Kol Adonai Vayachasaf Yerot V'Hechalo Kulo Mekavod Adonai Lamabuya
Ashav vayeshev Adonai melech leolam. Adonai oz le'amo yitem. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. We continue on page 155 with the Chatzi Kaddish that ends the Torah service and brings us into the Musaf, page 155. Shikoach, Rebecca.
Yid God Havi God Shemi Rabba. Yalamad Vrach Rudev Yamelech Machute. Bechaye Chanu V'Yomechon. V'chayid Chovid Israel. Bagala Bagala. Ovid Mahakari Vibrel.
Amen.
Yesh Mei Rabba Mivora. L'olam lo me'almaya. Yid barach. Yid barach v'ishtabach. V'yid ba'vitamam v'yid na'aseh v'yid hadar. V'yid haleh v'yid halal. Shemei dekudeshah.
Berechu.
Leila migo birlachada v'shirada. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran bi'alma v'imrel.
Amen. The Musaf begins on page 156b. We'll pray together on that page and the next one for the Kedusha, 157. Then we'll finish silently from 158 to 161.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gamer Chazanim Tovim V'Ganei HaKahol V'Zacher Chasdei Avon V'Mevi Goel Livnei V'neihem Le'man Shivah B'Yahava Melech Ozer V'Kid Moshiach Magin Baruch Atah Adonai Magin Avraham V'Kid Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai B'Chemiti Ma'ata Rav L'Hoshiyah Morid Atam Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed Bechayim Eitim V'Rachamim Rabim Samech Naflim V'Rovech Olim U'Madir Asurim U'Bechayim Emunatah L'Shenei Afar Michamocha B'Givurot U'Midah Melah Melech Mimid, U'B'chayeh, U'Masmiach Yeshua, V'ne'emanat Alachayot, Midim, Baruch Atah Adonai, B'chei Hamitim.
157.
Naharitzecha v'nagdishecha, Kisot Siyach, Sarvei Kodesh, Hamakdishim, Shimcha Bakodesh, Kakatu, Hayan Nevi'echa, V'karas El Zeviyar. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Melech Haaretz Kivodo. Kivodo, Mahali Olam, Mesharit of Shalim Zelazeh, Hayim Mikam Kivodo. Lil Madam, Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Kivodo Adonai Bimkomo. Bimkomo, Bimkomo, V'yifem Berachamim, V'yachonam, V'yachonam, Hamyachadim Shemo. Erev Avoger, B'chol Yom Damir, Pamayim B'yam, Shema Omrim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Eloheinu, Avinu, Makenu, Moshienu, Yashmienu, Sheni, Kol Chai, Liol Lachem, Leilohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור,
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, מלך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה.
ידור ואדוני כגדולך, לנצח נצח משלך נקדיש. שבחך אלוהינו מפינו למושלם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש, אתה ברך, אתה אדוני.
Baruch V'Elok Shemo.
האל הקדוש.
158 to 161. If you need more time to finish your individual Amidah, please take time to do so, or you can join us as we mark the end of the Musaf service and head into our concluding prayers on page 181 with Kaddish Shalem. Yolam olam el-maya yitbarach. Kadam upon Mishmai ve'yimeru. Amen. Amen. Shalom b'mroma. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Page 182, Ein Kelohenu. Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemakenu, Ein Kemoshienu, Michelohenu, Michadonenu, Michemakenu, Michemoshienu,
Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adoneinu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adoneinu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adoneinu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shekhiru, Avodeinu, Levanecha, Eketoret Asami.
Page 183, Aleinu L'Shabech.
Aleinu L'Shabech,
Ladon HaKol, Kedula Yotzer Breshit,
Shalom Asav, Velo Samana, Vipevada Adama, Shalom
Keinu Kahem,
Vigor Aleinu, Kamavamona,
Nahnu Korim, Kachavim Umodim, Melech Malchei HaMelachim, Kadosh, Baruch Hu, Shehu Not HaShamayim v'Yosei Haaretz, Yikarov HaShamayim mima'al, Ushchina Ruzo, Gav Hei Meromim, Hu Eloheinu, Ein Od.
Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai Imam Elohim Va'ed, V'nei
Emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu Adonai echad U'shemo echad. You may be seated. In solemn testimony to the unbroken faith which links one generation to the next, those in mourning or observing a yahrzeit now rise to praise God's name with the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Well, in just a second. But first, yahrzeits observed this week include Howard Earl Blumenthal, Edward Breiter, Teresa Franzbia Cohen, Ethel Dratch, Joe Dratch, Alan Edwards, Abraham Eisenstein, Anna Sekoff Feiler, Chaim Arn Feldman, Zena Friedman, Stella Goldstein, Harry Gottlieb, Herman Hanauer, Leonard Handel, Louis C. Horowitz, Jacob James Jefferson, Yeti Julia Jefferson, Meyer Kaminsky, Leona LeFand, Irvin Theodore Levy, Angel Lerma Maller? No, it's hard to tell. I think it's Mailer. Sam Maness, Philip Meyerson, Pearl Mintz, Chai Miriam Paul, Esther Perry, Minnie Reich, Sarah Renzier, Jacob Resnick, Maurice Reuter, Amy Roska, Max Shermer, Esther Schwartz, Mr. Ellis Joseph Seligman, Eliyahu Ben, David Semmel, Marion Mimi Silverberg, Mary Silverman, Harry Silverstein, Rosemarie Sokol, Pearl Celia Wide, Herman Weiss, Dr. Theodore Weisbuck, and Bernard Zalman. Kaddish is on page 184. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
B'olma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayei chon v'yomei chon. Chayei l'chol beit Yisrael. B'gala v'zman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach. Yolam u'lomei u'maya. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירום ואומה ואמרו אמן יהי שלמה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל אמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומה הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל אמרו amen. Kiddush. And don't sit down. We're going to have Kiddush.
V'shamiru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat L'asod et ha-Shabbat V'doru damri dalam Be'eni V'nei Yisrael ha'oti V'yalam kishesh adamim Asa Adonai Et ha-shamayim et ha'aretz Uvayom ha-shvi Shabbat v'yinavad Hagi birach l'nayot ha-Shabbat v'ygadasheha L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nitilat yadayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Good Shabbos. Welcome everyone on behalf of myself and the board, and we're all happy to see you. And it's still so wonderful, and I cherish being able to be in here again. And you know, it's terrible that we were off for so long, but there's one thing, you come back and it reminds you how wonderful it is to be here, and just so glad for everyone who's here and people who are able to watch on streaming. So I hope those of you who are watching on stream get an opportunity, if you haven't been back here, to come on a Shabbos and enjoy just being here. It's really wonderful. So let's go to the announcements. Let's see if anything's changed since last week. The office will be closed on July 5th for Independence Day, of course. Let's see. Sunday, July 18th, is Tisha B'Av and the fast, and saddest day on the Jewish calendar. It begins Saturday night of the 17th and Sunday the 18th, so check email for details. Looking down the road a bit, this is exactly what it said last week. August 28th, there'll be Slichot services after Shabbat. It's not too late to order honey for Rosh Hashanah. Free shipping will last until July 7th. After that, you've got to pay a little bit more, $5.50 per jar, so you want to get those orders in. New Year's greeting deadline is Tuesday, August 10th, so that's fast approaching. So please get your greetings in. Rosh Hashanah bakery orders must be in by Monday, August 23rd, so don't miss that deadline. Again, we're always working on the Mishaberach list. If you need to add anybody, please contact the office. You know, we take the names off every 6 weeks, but if you know somebody's better, please let us know. If they need to stay on, let us know that also. And I think that's it. So Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
I guess the only thing left to do is a Adon Olam.
That's right, and in view of the fact that tomorrow is the 4th, I like to do this. Let's try Adon Olam to the tune of Yankee Doodle Dandy, okay? So a little spirit here. Adon olam asher malach, terem kol yitzir nivra, ein nasa v'chefzako, azai melech shemo nikra, v'yacharei gichlo dago, levado yimloch nora, v'hu haya v'hu hove, v'hu yeh b'divara, v'hu echad sheni, chamshi lo lehachbira, v'li reshit v'li tachlit, v'lo ha'oz v'hamisra, v'hu eli v'chai goali, v'torchem li b'yitzara, v'hu nisi umanos li, v'nat kosi b'yom ekra, b'yado havgidrochi, b'edi shad v'ha'ira, v'imrochi givihati, Adonai li v'lo ira, Adon olam asher mala, b'terem kol yitzir nivra, v'yid nasa v'chem soko, azai melech shemo nikra.
Shabbat shalom.
And happy 4th.